Welcome back. Today we are exploring the final and honestly the most crucial step of personal finance. Using Ramit Sethi's book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. We are specifically zeroing in on Chapter 9.
Which is a huge pivot.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
If you've been following along with the philosophy in earlier chapters, those initial steps are all about automating your savings, setting up your investments, and, well, essentially getting your financial house in order. But what actually happens once you've won the spreadsheet game?
Yeah, that's the real question.
That is our mission today. We are looking at the real challenge for you, which is designing your actual lifestyle, navigating complex relationships, and conquering those massive anxiety-inducing big-ticket purchases. Okay, let's unpack this, because for you, the listener, this is the ultimate shortcut to mastering the emotional and social complexities of money without feeling completely overwhelmed.
It really is a massive pivot from the rest of the material. I mean, you spend so much time figuring out index funds, setting up automated transfers, tweaking percentages, but life happens entirely outside of that spreadsheet.
Because the math is easy, right?
Exactly. The psychology of applying that math to your real, messy, everyday life is where most people just get completely derailed.
I completely agree. And a huge part of that messy reality, especially for recent grads, is the student loan dilemma. The average college graduate right now is walking around with about $35,000 in student loan debt. The immediate instinct is just pure panic.
Which is a completely understandable human reaction. You just want that weight off your shoulders. But this raises an important question of what the math actually says versus what your emotions are telling you. Mathematically speaking, if your student loan has a super low interest rate, say around 2%, you should technically pay it off as slowly as the terms allow.
Because you can capture an average of an 8% return by taking your extra cash and investing it in the market instead.
You got it. You're netting a 6% difference. But financially optimizing isn't the same as emotionally optimizing.
Right. If I have 35 grand hanging over my head, telling me to just invest feels incredibly risky. Seeing a negative balance every single morning creates a knot in your stomach.
A perfectly optimized spreadsheet can't cure insomnia.
So how do we reconcile that fear with the math?
You don't ignore the fear, you accommodate it. That's where Sethi introduces this brilliantly pragmatic 50-50 hybrid approach. You take your extra money for the month and you put half of it toward paying down the debt above the minimum payment.
That gives you the psychological win.
Yes, it lets you sleep well at night knowing you are aggressively attacking the principal. Then you take the other half and invest it in tax-advantaged accounts.
Like a 401k or an IRA, right?
Yeah.
Where the government gives you a legal tax break just for saving your own money.
Exactly. You invest that second half so you don't miss out on the absolute magic of compound interest. Time is your most valuable asset. The 50-50 split is the perfect bridge between satisfying the math and soothing the emotion.
That makes a lot of sense. You hedge your bets between future wealth and current peace of mind. But speaking of emotion, nothing complicates your financial life quite like romantic relationships. The book shares a personal story about sitting down with his then-girlfriend, now wife, Cass. Right before Thanksgiving, he decided it was time to talk about the big things, kids, marriage, and money.
Yeah.
And he created an actual literal meeting agenda for this conversation.
It sounds incredibly rigid to bring a printed agenda to a romantic dinner, but it highlights the necessity of structured communication when you're dealing with high-stakes choices.
Well, the funniest part is that he realized she was absolutely the one when Cass looked at him and said she wanted to be engaged by Q1 of the next year.
She used corporate financial quarters to define their relationship timeline.
Exactly. But looking at that dynamic, it makes me wonder about the social friction. When you start organizing your life and your money this intentionally, how do the people around you react?
What's fascinating here is how taking control of your financial life actively disrupts the social status quo around you. Friends and family might start acting a bit strange. It holds a mirror up to their own insecurities.
People get defensive, they make excuses for why they can't save, or they try to pull you down with terrible, unsolicited advice. Hot stock tips from an uncle who is historically terrible with money.
Oh, absolutely.
Sethi actually shares this hilarious fantasy comeback for when someone deep in credit card debt tries to give him investing advice. He imagines sitting in a restaurant, looking up from his Thai papaya salad, dabbing his mouth with a napkin, looking the person up and down and calmly saying, "Why would I take advice from you?" And then the whole restaurant claps and the chef brings him free dessert.
It's a great visual and frankly a fantasy we've all had. But the underlying point is crucial for you to internalize, ignore the noise. The cultural narrative tells us that investing should be like a movie, full of adrenaline and people shouting on trading floors. It shouldn't be. Wealth building should be methodical, calm, and as boring as watching grass grow. The excitement shouldn't be inside your investment portfolio. The excitement should be in the rich life you live outside of it.
But living that rich life outside the spreadsheet means you eventually have to have some really hard conversations with the people you love, like aging parents. It has to be tough to realize the people who raised you might be struggling with debt. How does Sethi recommend broaching that topic without humiliating them?
He suggests a very gentle, indirect approach. You can actually use this deep dive as an excuse to bring the topic up naturally. Ask open-ended questions like, hey, I've been listening to this discussion on personal finance, and it made me wonder, where did you learn about managing money when you were my age?
And then you just let them talk.
Right. If it turns out they do need help, you have to resist the urge to take over their lives. You apply what he calls the 85% solution.
Which means you aren't trying to achieve perfection.
Exactly. Don't try to fix their entire financial life or audit a decade of spending. That just causes resentment. You focus on one or two small wins.
Okay.
Help them set up one automatic savings transfer or consolidate a single high-interest credit card. You get them 85% of the way to stability, which is far better than doing nothing because you wanted it 100% perfect.
That feels much more manageable. But let's flip that dynamic. What about when you are the one doing well and you want to share that success with your parents? The text includes advice from author Chris. When you start making really good money, you want to prove to your parents that you've made it. But Chris gives a strong warning against sharing your exact salary.
He does, and it's rooted in deep psychological insight. Chris points out that parents really just want to know you are secure, safe, and happy. Sharing massive, specific dollar amounts without context can accidentally communicate arrogance rather than security.
It shifts the dynamic.
Yes, from I am safe to I am wealthy, which can make holidays surprisingly awkward. It's better to share the security, not the spreadsheet.
That's a profound distinction. Now, shifting from parents to partners. When a relationship gets serious, Sethi recommends what he calls the big meeting, a 4 to 5 hour joint financial review where you lay absolutely everything bare. Debts, assets, spending habits. But what happens when there's a significant income disparity? Say one partner earns $5,000 a month and the other earns $4,000. Splitting rent 50-50 doesn't seem equitable.
It will absolutely cause resentment because the burden is heavier on the lower earner. So Sethi recommends using financial expert Suze Orman's proportional split method.
Right.
It's entirely math-based. In your example, the total household income is $9,000.
Okay.
The partner making $5,000 earns roughly 56% of that total. The partner making $4,000 earns roughly 44%. Therefore, the higher earner pays 56% of the rent and shared bills, and the other pays 44%.
It scales naturally with income and feels structurally fair. I love how objective that is. But friction is inevitable. What if one partner has a habit of spending what feels like an irresponsible amount of money, say on excessive video game purchases or expensive dinners out? How do you handle that without it turning into a screaming match?
The golden rule of financial disagreements is to never attack the person. You never say you spend way too much money, you're irresponsible. The moment you attack their character, they stop listening. Instead, you point to the plan.
The plan for the big meeting.
Yes. If spending gets out of hand, you redirect back to the agreed upon plan. You say, hey, we agreed we wanted to save $1,000 a month for the house down payment, but this spending is pulling us away from that goal. How do we adjust? You can't get defensive against a piece of paper. It turns the dynamic from me versus you into us versus the math.
That is such a crucial reframe. And you're definitely going to need a rock-solid plan if you are gearing up for major life milestones, like a wedding. The average American wedding right now costs around $35,000. Here's where it gets really interesting. Sethi introduces the concept of saving for a wedding before you are even engaged.
Culturally, that is considered incredibly weird.
Maybe even a bit presumptuous.
It might seem socially weird, but logically it makes perfect sense. If you know a massive, highly predictable 5-figure expense is coming down the pipeline, why wouldn't you start setting money aside for it? The alternative is going into massive credit card debt to pay for one single day.
But people always assume they have a workaround. They think, I'll just keep the wedding super small and cut my costs in half.
Yeah.
But the math on scaling down weddings is deeply surprising. Cutting your guest list by 50% only reduces your total costs by about 25%. Walk me through how that is mathematically possible.
It comes down to fixed versus variable costs. Yes, if you cut 50 guests, you save money on 50 plates of chicken and 50 slices of cake. Those are variable costs. But the venue rental fee is the same whether there are 50 people or 100 people.
The photographer, the DJ, the dress, the flowers for the bridal party.
Exactly. Those fixed costs don't care how many people are sitting in the chairs. You still have to pay the baseline, which is why shrinking the guest list doesn't yield the massive savings people anticipate.
That completely shatters that specific money-saving myth. While we are on marriage, we have to talk about the prenup taboo. Remittent Cass got a prenuptial agreement, and he is very open about how emotionally difficult that process was. Now, he acknowledges that 99% of everyday people do not actually need a prenup.
But if you are bringing business assets or a significant inheritance into the marriage, he argues it is essential. The resistance to prenups is entirely emotional. People feel like drafting one is essentially betting against your own marriage. You're planning for failure, but getting a prenup is signing at your best to prepare for the worst. When you are deeply in love, you are uniquely capable of making fair, generous decisions. If you wait until a divorce, you are dealing with anger, betrayal, and lawyers who are financially incentivized to make you fight.
It's a pragmatic safety net. I like that perspective. But look, paying for $35,000 weddings and funding a rich life requires capital. Eventually, you have to focus your energy on earning more. And the single fastest, most legal way to make a significant amount of money is by negotiating your salary.
Specifically, the single best time to negotiate is when you are starting a brand new job. A simple 10-minute conversation can literally yield you $5,000 to $10,000.
That almost sounds too good to be true.
It sounds exaggerated, but it's not. The problem is that negotiation terrifies people. They think they're going to seem greedy or lose the job offer. But negotiation is 90% mindset and 10% tactics. You have to understand the psychology of the hiring manager. The company doesn't care about your personal bills. They care about how you are going to make them look good and help them hit their goals.
So how do you actually execute that 10-minute conversation?
There are 4 cardinal rules to protect your leverage. First, never reveal your current salary. If they ask, pivot. Telling them what you currently make gives them an artificial ceiling. Second, don't make the first offer. Force them to anchor the negotiation.
Third, always try to have a competing offer.
Even if it's from a company you don't really want to work for, it creates scarcity and massive leverage. And finally, you have to practice out loud with a tough friend. Have them role play the stingiest, most aggressive hiring manager possible. It feels silly, but it wires your brain to stay calm under pressure.
And when you apply those rules, the results can be staggering. Like the case study about a woman named Rachel. She secured a massive 28% raise. But she didn't just walk in and demand it. She did intense, granular research on the company and emailed a 3-point strategic plan to her potential boss, outlining exactly how she would immediately improve their marketing efforts.
She essentially proved her undeniable value before day one. That is the ultimate power move. She shifted the conversation from how much does Rachel cost to look at how much value Rachel is going to generate for us. When you frame it that way, a 28% premium is a bargain for the company.
Now, once you are earning that kind of elevated capital, you are inevitably going to face the true big-ticket items. Cars and houses. This is where people routinely wipe out years of disciplined saving with one bad signature. Let's start with cars. Sethi advises that you have to optimize for the long term. Buy a reliable car, maintain it meticulously, and hold on to it for more than 10 years.
Because you have to factor in the total cost of ownership, or TCO. Most people only look at the monthly payment the dealer offers them. But TCO includes the cascading costs, your monthly insurance premiums, the cost of gas, the price of replacement parts, and routine maintenance. A luxury German sedan might have a manageable lease, but the TCO over 5 years will absolutely bleed you dry compared to a reliable Japanese sedan.
And the buying process itself is usually a nightmare. But Sethi shares his exact tactic for completely avoiding the dealership mind games. He waited until the very end of December. He emailed multiple dealers simultaneously, told them the exact make, model, and trim he wanted, and explicitly told them he was emailing their competitors.
He triggered a bidding war from his laptop. Because it was the end of the year and dealers were desperate to meet their annual quotas, he ended up getting his car for $2,000 under the actual invoice price, all without leaving his couch.
That is the power of understanding the system's incentives and using them to your advantage. But as impressive as that is, let's talk about the biggest ticket item of all, houses. There's a deeply ingrained cultural myth that real estate is always unconditionally a fantastic investment. We really need to dismantle that.
People constantly repeat the phrase that renting is just throwing your money away, but data from the Nobel Prize-winning Yale economist Robert Shiller challenges that. Shiller's data shows that over a 100-year period, home prices only increased by an average of 0.6% per year after adjusting for inflation.
Hold on a second, just 0.6%. Over a century! How is that possible when we hear about housing markets booming by 20% in a single year?
Because people look at the sale price and ignore inflation. And more importantly, they ignore the phantom costs of homeownership.
When you rent, the maximum you will pay each month is your rent. When you own, your mortgage is
the minimum you will pay. Exactly. You are hit with property taxes, endless maintenance, the roof leaks, the furnace dies, and massive transactional fees like the 6% realtor fee when you eventually sell. Plus, if you don't have a huge 20% down payment, you get hit with PMI.
Just to clarify, PMI is private mortgage insurance. It's essentially a penalty fee you have to pay every single month to protect the lender just because you didn't have enough cash up front.
Exactly. It offers you zero benefit. So when you factor in inflation, taxes, maintenance, and fees, the actual return on a primary residence is shockingly low. That completely changes the narrative that renting is throwing money away. Renting is often a brilliant financial move, provided you take the money you save on taxes and maintenance and actually invest it in the stock market.
So a house shouldn't be viewed as a golden ticket to wealth.
A house is a lifestyle purchase first and an investment second. You buy it because you want to paint the walls and plant a garden, not because it's going to make you rich. If you do decide the lifestyle is worth it, the rules are strict but simple. Stick to a standard 30-year fixed-rate mortgage and ensure your total housing costs do not exceed 30% of your gross monthly income. If you can't hit those numbers, keep your money invested and continue to rent.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We started by resolving the anxiety of student loans with the 50-50 hybrid approach. We talked about calm conversations with aging parents using the 85% solution and how to split rent equitably with a partner.
We learned how to ignore the social noise of terrible advice and why you should practically prepare for massive events like weddings before you even have a ring.
We covered how to massively increase your earning power by negotiating your salary with a strategic plan, debunked the 0.6% myth that real estate is the ultimate investment, and showed you how to outsmart a car dealership. But if we do all this, where does this actually lead?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the end game becomes very clear. Once your entire financial system is automated, your bills pay themselves, your investments grow in the background, your debt is managed, your daily grinding stress about money just vanishes. And the ultimate goal of building wealth isn't hoarding it in a bank account. The ultimate goal is giving back.
It's about outward impact.
Precisely. You don't have to be a tech billionaire to be a philanthropist. Once your system works, you have the bandwidth to help others. The community actually rallied together and raised $300,000 for the charity Pencils of Promise,
which ended up fully funding and building 13 schools for impoverished children around the world.
It proves that once you master the spreadsheet, your money transforms into a tool for immense good.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. Once you automate the math, once you negotiate the salary, buy the house, and finally conquer the spreadsheet, money simply becomes a mirror. It forces you to stop asking the anxious question, how can I afford this? And start asking a much deeper question. What legacy am I actually funding with the time and wealth I've freed up?
That is a very powerful question to leave off on. The spreadsheet is just the beginning. The actual vibrant life you build with it is what matters.
Perfectly said. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you found this custom breakdown helpful for your own journey in designing your rich life, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who could use a little financial clarity. Your support helps us keep bringing you these. Until next time, keep looking beyond the spreadsheet.